Some say that God had to finely tune the universe, that the physical constants that make the ingredients for life possible to exist in our universe are within such a narrow range that it had to be done on purpose by an intelligent force. In the same way that evolution did away with the fine-tuning of life, and the discovery of extrasolar planets did away with the fine-tuning of Earth, some good scientific arguments like the multiverse and top-down cosmology are on the way to deal with this little fine-tuning boy who keeps crying wolf. But to make this fine-tuning argument untenable for classical theism, all we really need to do is honestly answer a simple question. Why do you have to finely tune something? What's the reason for fine-tuning? Think about it. It's not because you're powerful, it's because you're powerless. It's not because you want to, it's because you have to. Lotus wanted this car to perform a certain way, so they had to finely tune it. But why couldn't they just build it in whatever way they wanted without care or measure and expect it to perform exactly the way they intended? Because we are bound by uncompromising external restrictions. In the case of finely tuning a car, or musical instrument, or any physical thing really, those external restrictions are called physics. The sole necessity for fine-tuning is because of external restrictions. So if God had to finely tune the universe because it couldn't have been created any other way, I ask you, theists, what were God's external restrictions? And who or what imposed those restrictions upon God? What forced God's design in the same uncompromising way that our designs are forced by physics? External restrictions cause the need for fine-tuning. God finely tuned the universe. Therefore, God is bound by external restrictions. But it gets worse, much worse. If you have a job to do, will it be more difficult if you have many restrictions hindering you? And will those restrictions affect the outcome? Well, obviously, yes. Our tight budgets cause us to fine-tune our shopping lists. An office worker will fine-tune his project to meet a short deadline. When designing a building, an architect must consider gravitational stresses. All of these external restrictions are not only going to force these people to finely tune their projects, but their ideal result will be compromised. If these people were something like omnipotent gods, then the shopper is suddenly a trillionaire. The office worker can complete his project anytime next century if he wants. The architect doesn't have to abide by gravity. Think about how liberating that would be for them. They'd have freedom to do exactly what they intend. External restrictions impede creative freedom. Lack of creative freedom impedes the intended result. Therefore, to achieve the intended result, it is better to have fewer external restrictions. But some theists seem to think that the more constants they can claim were finely tuned to an exact degree, then the more they're strengthening the case for their God. But actually, they're making their God seem downright powerless, maybe even superfluous. More restrictions showcase weakness and pulls the creator further from the intended result. So if God had many restrictions that forced an immense fine-tuning, we could legitimately conclude that he is not omnipotent, and that we don't as much resemble his ideal end result, but instead resemble the products of a greatly burdened engineer who was little more than a guy who fit a round peg into a round hole. An omnipotent God can create exactly what he intends because he has ultimate creative freedom. But according to the fine-tuning argument, God could only have made the universe in a very specific way. In other words, he had no creative freedom, the opposite of omnipotence. A puzzle piece can only fit into the puzzle one kind of way, but that doesn't mean you designed the puzzle. It just means you push the piece into place, which any child can do. Maybe all it took was a natural nudge, or maybe it was the only place the piece could fall. As far as we can tell, life is just a tiny, tiny part of the universe. If the universe was created specifically for life, then I would expect it to revolve around us, so to speak. An omnipotent being could have created in whatever way he wanted, and if he wanted the universe to be for us, then instead of there being billions of light years of hostile space, it could have been billions of light years of a Garden of Eden. Or it could have been something more inconceivable, like an innocuous space filled with disembodied minds. But that's not what we see. We see Earth life, which is mostly bacteria and aquatic, existing in a rather precarious, temporary, minuscule film, coating a ball of rock hurling through a hostile vacuum. We are but the single blink of an eye, exclaiming that the eye exists just so that we could have our blink.